The prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace, or the POSH policy, which is known in common, is a policy that is available everywhere, but not all employees are completely aware of what it entails. So understanding the POSH policy applicable to the Murugappa Group companies is an intrinsic part of all induction programs into the company itself. So what is the background of the POSH Act? So Banwari Devi was a social worker and a government employee in Rajasthan. In 1992, she reported an incident of gang rape to the police. What was particularly shocking about this case was that the perpetrators were upper caste men from the village who were offended by her efforts to stop child marriage. As a form of revenge, they raped her. However, when Banwari Devi sought justice, they faced tremendous hurdles. So in the Vishaka case, Vishaka and others versus the state of Rajasthan, the Supreme Court of India in 1997 acknowledged that there was a legal vacuum concerning sexual harassment at the workplace. The court ruled that in the absence of legislation in the matter, employers and institutions should follow specific guidelines laid down in this judgment, which were primarily based on international conventions and norms. So these Vishaka guidelines became a crucial interim measure until the government could enact specific legislation to address sexual harassment. So these guidelines included the establishment of an internal complaints committee, the requirement for employers to prevent and to redress harassment, and measures to ensure that the confidentiality and fair treatment is awarded to all complainants. So subsequently, the Parliament passed the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act in 2013. So this legislation provided a comprehensive legal framework to address and prevent sexual harassment at the workplace, covering both the public as well as the private sectors. So this act built upon the foundation laid by the Vishaka guidelines. So what is the objective and applicability of the act? It is to provide a safe work environment that is free from sexual harassment. While the act in itself only protects or only involves women under its umbrella, the Murugappa Group's POSH policy is a gender-neutral policy and is applicable to all Murugappa Group companies, including associate companies as well as joint ventures. So before we move on to the next slide, what are we addressing here? It's the 4 W's: the what, the who, the when, and the where. So what is sexual harassment? So as per the Act, there are a list of acts that can be construed as sexual harassment. So while initially, if you look at the slide, it says that it includes any one or more of the following in combination with a set of other circumstances. So it can be an unwelcome acts and behaviors, physical contact or advances, making sexually colored remarks, and so on and so forth. And in combination with certain circumstances, while the existence of these circumstances is not mandatory. So what can these circumstances be? It can be the promise of preferential treatment. It can be the threat of detrimental treatment, and so on. So to give you a list of practical examples that will help you better understand what can be construed as sexual harassment, you can take, for instance, the display of explicit material, an invasion of personal space, stalking, blackmail or threats, sexual coercion, unwanted gaze or staring, inappropriate gifts, comments on clothing, sexting, blocking advancements, as well as retaliation. It is essential to remember that the definition of sexual harassment is not limited to these examples, and it can encompass various behaviors and actions that create a hostile or offensive work environment for women. The key is that such behavior is unwelcome and makes the victim feel uncomfortable, intimidated, or humiliated. Coming to the next W, who is an employee? All persons employed at any workplace in the company is considered an employee. So what is a workplace? And this is where the general perception gets tricky. Because all establishments, offices, administrative units or otherwise are considered workplace. But at the same time, if you were to conduct business at any place other than your workplace in itself, but it is during the course of employment, then that is considered your workplace too. So any place visited by an employee during the course of employment, which includes transportation, comes within the definition of workplace. So when there is an instance of sexual harassment, who is the first place you take it to? There is a formation of an internal complaints committee as per the Act, and all establishments, that is commercial establishments or corporate establishments, are required to have an internal complaints committee. So each office or administrative unit having more than 10 employees should have a committee. So at least 50% of this committee should be women, and the term of this committee should not be longer than 3 years. So coming to the last two W's, when and where. So when and where does sexual harassment have to take place for the jurisdiction of the Internal Complaints Committee to be invoked? So the complainant and the respondent can both be employees. Then investigation by the ICC is guaranteed. The complainant can be a third party and the respondent can be an employee. And in this occasion too, the ICC can investigate the complaint. And in the last instance, when the complainant is an employee but the respondent is a third party, in this situation, an investigation by the ICC cannot be taken up. A question that many employees have, or it is a common conundrum that takes place in workplaces, is what if the sexual harassment had been instanced by a third party who is not an employee of the company, but it was against an employee of a company. So if a complaint relates to sexual harassment of an employee by a third party, then the complaint shall be referred to the management or the HR for appropriate action. So the management can take appropriate action against the said third party, and the management can also initiate action under the Indian Penal Code. This is a very important portion of this awareness program. So when sexual harassment occurs, how is a complaint lodged with the ICC? So the ICC complaint can be lodged via a common email ID which will be addressed to the ICC, and this will be provided to you at the time of your joining. So this complaint needs to be made in writing not more than 3 months after the occurrence of the incident. And if it was a series of incidents, then not more than 3 months since the occurrence of the last incident. And it can further be extended by 3 months if the committee agrees that an extension is due. A common mail ID will be available at every Murugappa group company. So what should be the contents of the complaint? So the complaint should obviously have the name of the complainant, the contact details of the complainant, the name of the alleged harasser and their details, details of the alleged incidents, evidence if any, list of witnesses if any. If a complainant is unable to make a complaint for any reason, then an ICC member may be able to assist the complainant in making the complaint. So if the complainant is not literate, then the ICC member is to read out the complaint to the complainant and to obtain the signature or thumbprint of the complainant to ensure that the complaint is logged. So here are a few case scenarios to help you better understand what can and cannot be construed as sexual harassment. So while at work, an employee named Nina makes personal phone calls to her friends on company time. So her conversations are loud and generously sprinkled with foul and obscene language. So her co-workers in nearby cubicles cannot help but overhear these conversations. So can Nina's behavior be interpreted as sexual harassment? So if no, explain why not, and if yes, explain why. If you answered yes, then you would be right. Because harassment in the workplace does not have to be directed at a particular individual. Nina's behavior would have affected her co-workers by being offensive and unwelcome. So they may believe that the behavior creates for them a hostile work environment, even though she is not speaking directly to them. So while it may not be construed as sexual harassment, it is harassment nonetheless, and it comes within the ambit of this act, and as well as the POSH policy. So here we have case scenario 2. Murali persists in asking his co-worker, Maria, out to dinner several times. And while she has always told him no, Murali's behavior keeps continuing. So Murali's behavior does not constitute sexual harassment, because sexual harassment can only happen between a male boss and a female subordinate. True or false? Explain why. The answer would be false. Although harassment frequently involves in power relationships where there is a position of authority and a person in a subordinate relationship, sexual harassment may occur between any co-workers and may not necessarily affect a reporting relationship. So if Maria found Murali's requests as unwelcome, and if he persists in asking her out, in spite of a clear statement stating no, his behavior may be construed as sexual harassment. Finally, we come to case scenario 3. Alexander frequently tells off-colored jokes during team meetings. So Leela is very offended by these jokes. She doesn't think Alexander's jokes are funny. So while Alexander's behavior is not sexual harassment because his jokes were made in fun and he does not intend to sexually harass anyone, does this constitute sexual harassment? It does. Sexual harassment may occur even if the harasser does not intend the conduct to be offensive. Secondly, as we dealt with before, sexual harassment occurs even when the specific conduct is not directed at a certain individual. Sexual harassment occurs when it has an impact on the work environment or employment status of a co-worker. So while one off-colored joke may not result in a sexual harassment claim, if this type of behavior pervades the working environment, then chances are some workers will find it offensive and unwelcome and hence can make a complaint.
Workplace sexual harassment is a behavior that is unwelcome, sexual in nature, and the experience is subjective. That is, different people may react in different ways. It is the impact of the act that matters and not the intent. It almost always occurs in a matrix of power. So go through these scenarios that I will show you next and answer the question that follows. Ria enters her office building and Raj meets her near the lift. He immediately comments, "You are looking hot in this dress." Ria then says, "Raj, I do not like such comments. These make me uncomfortable." After that, Raj does not repeat this behavior. Is this sexual harassment? Say yes or no. Megha receives a WhatsApp message from her colleague Ravindra. She checks the message and it is a video clip from a pornographic movie. Megha is offended and files a complaint to the POSH cell. Is Megha within her rights? Answer yes or no. Reema has joined a new office. Her manager asks her to join on a video call at 10 p.m. that night. Reema agrees, thinking this is how they work here. During the call, Reema discovers that she is the only one talking to her manager, and her manager asks her a few general questions like what movies she likes watching. He then says that he will have a video call with her every night as this is the only time that he is free. Reema tries telling him that she cannot be on a call every night. Can't things be discussed next morning? But he says that if she doesn't join the call, he will report this as insubordination. Reema feels uncomfortable and she's contemplating resigning. Should she file a sexual harassment complaint? Answer yes or no.
So this brings us to the end of the induction with regard to the POSH policy, and any further questions pertaining to this act and any awareness herein can be addressed to the HR department when required. Thank you.